Hi, I'm Neil Tyson from Right Way Compliance, and I wanted to talk to you about sanctions, international sanctions placed by various governments around the world in order to achieve particular political outcomes, but also to put pressure on countries and individuals in terms of trying to instill a change of behaviour. And why I particularly wanted to talk to you about that is that actually all organisations, businesses, charities, etc., have a part that they can play in making sure that those international sanctions that get applied are effective. So if you'd like to know in terms of exactly how that could apply to you, then this may be of interest to you. What I wanted to say is that obviously there's a lot of talk, particularly for regulated businesses, around this, but this is something that applies to not just the regulated sector, anyone in the UK, including UK citizens based abroad, and also companies registered in the UK. So quite broad ranging in terms of who needs to comply with these regulations. Now, the UK sanctions are put in place actually either by the UK government, but also we apply UN sanctions as well through our domestic legislation. So some of these will be as a result of action taken specifically by the UK government, but also as part of our role within the United Nations Security Council. So notwithstanding those kind of legal and regulatory points that need to be covered, there's also a kind of an ethical stance here. So we've seen other organisations going beyond what the actual legal and regulatory requirements are as far as sanctions are concerned. So for example, European football finals that have been taken away from Russia, the Russian Grand Prix taken out of the F1 calendar, and a number of other organisations have made decisions about how they're going to trade with Russia. Now, obviously, the Russian situation in Ukraine is what's brought all of this to light, but sanctions have been around for many years, and they can be applied at kind of a country regime level. They can be applied at individual level. They can also be applied for particular types of reasons as well. So there's a whole range of sanctions out there, and sometimes the news only focuses on those sanctions that have been applied to freeze the assets of certain individuals. But actually they can apply to trade restrictions with a much broader remit, so not against particular individuals or companies, but actually in terms of actually the supply of goods and services to particular countries, to particular regimes. So again, important that organisations understand what the different types of sanctions that can be applied and how they might relate to their business or organisation operations. Now, in terms of what makes an effective compliance regime with these, because that's really what I want to talk to you about, how organisations can actually make these effective. There isn't actually any legal guidance out there or statutory regulatory input as to exactly what organisations need to do to comply. So unlike the money laundering regulations that some organisations might be used to, where actually some of the things that you need to do are prescribed within the regulations, that doesn't apply in sanctions. But nevertheless, actually, there are quite severe penalties involved for organisations and individuals that actually breach the sanctions. So although there's no actual legal requirements on what you must do, if you then actually breach a sanction, you can have quite severe penalties applied, both criminal penalties, so up to 7 years in prison, as well as financial monetary penalties that can be applied to organisations, but also the individuals behind those organisations. So really key as to why we should be looking at this. Now, what we can say is that actually when we look at how other financial crime regulations are applied. I said about the money laundering regulations. The same is true for anti-bribery and corruption. There are kind of recognised frameworks for the best way of implementing an effective compliance process. And those involve a number of key elements. And we talk about effective governance structures, making sure that they've got clear roles and responsibilities within the organisation. A documented risk assessment, so that actually an organisation is responding to the specific types of risk that it might have based on the products and services that it supplies, the types of customer and suppliers that it deals with, the geographical jurisdictions that they operate in. All of those factors are going to dictate what and how these sanctions relate to them. And then obviously on the back of that, effective policies and procedures that are implemented appropriately through staff training and knowledge to make sure that they are consistently and effectively applied by those organisations. Because what you're really trying to do is to make sure that you're not dealing with customers, suppliers, in the case of charities, donors that are on that sanctioned list. Or indeed broader than that, that you're not sending payments or receiving payments from sanctioned accounts. And that's another key area that we've seen actually in one of the latest enforcement actions that was taken in the UK, where a company was received a financial penalty, about £35,000, which may not seem huge compared to some of the regulatory fines that we see elsewhere. But that was around 15 payments that were sent to sanctioned accounts. And the implication there is that actually all organisations need to be checking where payments are going to and where payments are coming from when looking, make sure that they're not dealing with sanctioned bank accounts. So this isn't something that is just the responsibility of the banks. We've all got a role, or all organisations have got a role in making sure that these sanctions are effectively applied. Now, another common mistake is that organisations assume that there is one kind of overarching list of who these individuals, who these entities are that have been sanctioned. And unfortunately, that's not the case. There are what's called a consolidated list in the UK that is put together by the Office for Financial Sanctions Implementation. But that doesn't necessarily include all the prescribed terror organisations that would you'd also be prohibited from dealing with. So it's really important that actually when you're looking at your sanctions screening, that you're making sure that you're checking against the full list of sanctioned entities. And obviously if you're dealing with countries outside of the UK, you also need to be looking at what those local jurisdictions have put in place as far as sanctions are concerned as well, to make sure that you're also complying with those. There are obviously automated tools that are out there that you can use to help you with that. But the important thing there with the automated tools is that you understand what kind of checks they're making and that those checks are appropriate for your assessed risk. So it still comes back to your risk assessment that you'll need to put in place. So those are kind of some of the key elements that will make up an effective sanctions program for your organisation. If you'd like to learn more about that, then we've actually put together a new digital course, our Sanctions Screening 101, as we've called it, which is what makes an effective compliance program. That's really what we're going to look at in the course. And we'll cover all of the elements that we've gone through very in summary format just now. We'll cover those in more detail and give you some pointers as to what good practice and what poor practice looks like in each of those areas. So those are the things that you can learn about on the course. We'll put the link in the details below. But also, if you're looking at your sanctions program and want to know whether it is effective or not, we can do independent reviews and audits of existing sanctions programs that you might have in place in your organisation to give you assurance that they are operating and designed effectively. So I hope that's been useful. Please reach out if you'd like any more information in terms of the links below the video, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Many thanks.